We are so happy to have with us Rick Hanson in our class, Meditation, Volunteering, and Positive Neuroplasticity. You know Rick Hanson, he does tons of work everywhere. I mean, he's just so generous with his knowledge and knowing. And one time when I was teaching in the Berkeley Buddhist monastery, they said, you know, when difficult time comes, there are going to come 500 Buddhas. And I said, well, I hope half of those are women, but I think that Rick is definitely one of them. He's just so wonderful, so generous, unassuming, intelligent, bright, everything. So, and here are some of his books that I have been following for a long time and enjoying a lot. Just one thing which has these little practices that you can implement in your daily life to just come back to a greater understanding of your own processes and how to keep working in positive ways with it. Really lovely tips. Buddha's Brain, which is the one that we use when I first created this course in 2013, we were including a lot of Buddha's Brain because Rick was connecting Buddhist teachings and neuroplasticity, and then practical ways in which we could apply it in daily life. And I totally love this. So we had, you know, segments of this that we were discussing in the course. Later on, Resilient, as you can see, 2018, and we also, you know, kind of used a lot of it in the course, the other iteration then. And more recently, Neurodharma, 7 practices that are really wonderful to take you along and deeper in the path. And besides this, there is a podcast that Rick does with his son, Forrest, which are absolutely delightful. And, you know, Wednesday evenings where you can participate in meditations and then ask questions. I mean, just go to Rick's website and you have tons of things. I mean, you could just have that for the rest of your life. There will be plenty of things there. And on top of that, he's writing also a new book, but we'll wait for that one. So a real pleasure to have you here, Rick. I mean, I can't talk enough about how wonderful you are. And we were talking about if you could lead us perhaps in a practice, and also we were talking about how to work with things that come up in our life in different ways, how to move towards leaning towards the positive, and you had thought of some of that. And then at the end, we are going to have also questions that are going to be through done in the chat and integrated with what you teach. And maybe if we have extra time, we'll also talk about the mind as flow of energy and information, which is what we were discussing just before you came. But I want to honor what we talked about so that we go first to that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, all of you. Particularly, I want to thank you, Amelia, of course, Professor Barili. And it's been a pleasure to develop a friendship with you. And I just know you as an extremely gifted teacher and being. And so people are fortunate to be in your presence, and I feel fortunate today. So I thought we could do a little experiential practice in a moment, and it relates to a topic or a territory of topics that has to do with our wants. Loosely defined, broadly, wants, needs, preferences, values, ranging from very soft wishes to, we could say, intense, even addictive kinds of cravings, you know, the whole range. So the question being, what is our relationship with our own desires broadly? And second, what is our relationship with the desires of others? including the others perhaps that we're with when we volunteer with different populations, and also with the people that we live with or work with or have ongoing and important relationships with. How do we respond? What do we feel when they want something? Especially if it's not what we want, or if it comes at us with a fair amount of topspin and intensity. How do we respond then? So that's sort of general territory that I want to explore, including how to develop through positive neuroplasticity, how to develop internal resources, inner strengths, broadly stated, such as grit or gratitude, compassion, self-worth, how to develop these inner strengths, which also include social skills and emotional intelligence and capacity to be nimble and effective with different kinds of people. How can we develop these strengths inside us so that when wants arise, ours or theirs, we can manage them skillfully? We cannot be overwhelmed by the wants, and we can also find effective ways to respond to them. And do this over time, increasingly, while maintaining a deep, internal, unconditional sense of balance inside, resilient well-being inside, so that even when the waves of life come and the storms of life come, our boat remains on an even keel, going forward, sailing the deep, dark blue. How do we actually do that? So I hope to explore that broadly. To kind of enter into that, I thought I could guide you through a little meditation. It's one that I love and use routinely for myself. And it has to do with helping yourself in the present. This is the key phrase. In the present, feel that there is an enoughness in terms of your various desires. Broadly and somewhat biologically, we could categorize as under the umbrellas of safety, satisfaction, and connection. Three major categories.
I'm going to ask Robert to put you in the main screen because I can't do it from here. I'm trying to spotlight you, but Robert, can you please spotlight Dr. Hanson alone while he teaches the meditation? Yes, it's done.
I think there's a line from, you may know it, Arthur C. Clarke, a great science fiction writer, especially in the previous century, who said that any technology that is sufficiently advanced seems like magic. And to me, there's so much about Zoom and the internet that really is like magic, which is great, right? Magic. Okay, so I'm going to guide you through a little practice that's really about both observing that there actually is enough in the present and helping yourself feel that there is enough. And in the doing of this, what often starts to become quite apparent when you're mindful in this way is this tendency of the Stone Age brain, and then the Stone Age brain that's had a whole bunch of life experiences, the tendency of this brain of ours to chronically feel like there actually isn't enough, or to tell us that there isn't enough, or act like there isn't enough. So I'll guide you through this. And think of this as a little experiment. When we come back from it after about 10 minutes, you can kind of report on what happened in the laboratory of your own being. All right? You want to give it a whirl?
Yes.
Okay, great. Like any practice, feel free to adapt my suggestions to what's good for you. Know and recognize that, of course, I'm going to offer language and perspectives and images that come from my own background, which has been privileged in a lot of ways. There are other different ways of talking about these kinds of things, and find the ones that work for you. Okay, so here we go. With your eyes open or closed, see if you can begin to recognize whatever is true in the present, that you are basically all right now. Simple ways, non-conceptual ways, feeling a sufficiency of breathing, being aware of the ongoing livingness in the present of the body. Notice the mind's tendency to move away from the present. Instead, can you observe directly and keep refreshing the sense that I am actually safe enough now. Whatever the future may hold, can you recognize that you're basically all right right now? What happens in your mind when you really recognize this? Can there be a letting go of anxiety? In the present, can there be a softening of any armor or bracing? Any habit of defensiveness? No need for that in the present, as you judge best yourself. But if it's true that in the present, you're basically all right, can there be a lowering of your guard? It can help to know that you can continue to be alert and vigilant. It can help to know that in you is a lot of ability to cope if difficulties or threats actually come in the present. So that meanwhile, you really can afford to relax and to let go of bracing and anxiety and really enjoy the feeling of being basically okay right now. Can you find the enjoyment of relief, reassurance, ease, and peacefulness in recognizing that you're okay now? Let whatever sense of peacefulness and calm presence that you've developed, let it move to the background. And let's focus now on a sense of contentment in the present. Finding a feeling of gratitude for so many things. knowing that you can have important goals and ambitions and dreams while still feeling fundamentally content in the present. Being aware of any sense of being discontent or frustrated or driven or craving some pleasure. And see if you can let those go as you dwell increasingly in a beautiful, simple feeling of being content in the present. In fact, you can meditate on the feeling of contentment. And while dwelling in contentment, you can be aware of subtleties of craving, of contraction or pressure, drivenness, insisting, grasping, possessing. You can be aware of these that keep somehow coming up, even though you know that actually in the present there's enough. Dwelling in the sense of feeling content while being aware of other things moving through awareness. And then, finally, letting the sense of contentment or related feelings of gratitude move to the back of awareness and focus on a simple sense of being open-hearted. Maybe being aware of the breath and the areas of the heart. And finding a basic sense of good wishes, benevolence for others and yourself, and resting in that so that it's enough to be open-hearted and to wish beings well. And as you rest in this simple sense that it's enough to be open-hearted and you're rested in good wishes, you can notice that feelings of envy or hostility, resentment can fall away. Feelings of self-doubt or shame can fall away. As you feel the simple truth in the present of your own good heart. And as we finish up, taking half a minute maybe or so, see if you can find a general sense or just explore it very broadly of a kind of mood or atmosphere in your mind, a blend. It's a blend of peacefulness, contentment, and love in the present. Dwelling in peacefulness, contentment, and love as peacefulness, contentment, and love dwell in you. All right, come on back. So maybe I'll offer just kind of a few ideas that are sort of framing perspectives and then open it up for discussion, and including real world applications. So desires are normal at all levels of the architecture of the body, within cells, within parts of cells. There are, in effect, goals that the cells have and the parts of them have and then larger assemblies have that are the aims that keep the organism alive. And in creatures with the nervous system, the sense of those goals starts moving up into some kind of awareness related often to a fundamental experience of pleasant, unpleasant, relational, or neither. None of the above, completely neutral. These are the so-called hedonic tones, which traditionally have been thought mainly of pleasure and pain. And I think it's very important to appreciate our enormously social nature and include the hedonic tone or the felt sense of being related with others, even if it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And so wants are really normal. To decide you don't want to have wants is a want. There's no way out of that. Wants are layered. For example, let's say we get angry with somebody. Underneath that anger is often a softer desire to be liked or valued or not obstructed, to be cherished, to be appreciated, to be treated well. So they're deeper layers. Often those layers are grounded in childhood, the younger layers in our psyche that have to do with wants, let's say in relationships. Wants are also situated culturally, economically, politically, socially. They depend on their context. They're contextual, both in terms of the context of the living body and the particular situation that a person finds themselves in. So wants are situated. Now here's a really interesting question for you maybe. How did people respond to your wants when you were a kid? Now, quick story about my mom. Wonderful, loving, large-hearted person, no longer alive, grew up in the Depression and was raised by a single mother in poor circumstances, poverty of various kinds. And so she was kind of old school in her parenting style with love. And so when she came to see her grandson, her first grandchild, Forrest, our first child, when he was very little, he was in my arms. My mom and dad came up from Los Angeles to visit us where we lived in Marin County at the time, where I still live, and we still live. And so my mom, big loving person, picked up Forrest, sat down on the couch, with him, and perched him as maybe about a month-old kid. So he was a pretty little infant. And little infants, if you may know, have difficulty keeping their head raised up. They don't have much strength yet. So she perched him, and she was fairly large because based on an accident, she started acquiring type 2 diabetes. she perched him on her ample bosom, which I kind of think of as the landing deck of an aircraft carrier from the perspective of an infant. Forrest is perched there. My mom had glasses and big jangling earrings, and she, her face was like this far away from him, and she was going, "Oh, goo, goo, oh," just making all kinds of grandmotherly noises. And Forrest had been completely calm before this, and then he started to fuss, like, good, good, and I watched this for a bit and controlled myself. My wife was controlling herself too. And then I said to my mom, "Gee, Mom, I think he kind of wants you to hold him maybe sideways, a little like this. And, you'd probably be happier that way." Then her reply was, "He doesn't know what he wants."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, principle number one of a certain kind of culture of parenting. Oh, he doesn't know what he wants. I know what he should want. He doesn't know what he wants. Second, then I said, well, I think he does know what he wants. He was happier before. He kind of wants, to be held in a different way, less stressful, kind of easier going. And my mom is ramping up meanwhile and getting more, "Oh yeah, goo goo," trying to get a rise out of him. And she's got good intentions, but kind of clueless. And so then I said those things to her, like he knows what he wants. He wants to be held differently. Then she said, principle number two, who cares what he wants?
Nope.
I said, well, I do. And I kind of took him back, and then he calmed down immediately. And that was a very telling moment. It helped me realize kind of principles in which I was raised. Children are to be seen and not heard. They are kind of like little savages, need to be civilized, a very psychoanalytic notion. Adults know better. And even if the kid does know what they want, their wants don't have standing. They don't matter that much. So there you go, right? Not abusive, not bad, nothing that would get a visit from the Child Protective Services, even today, and still enacted 10,000 times each month, month after month, year after year. Living in that kind of environment has effects. And so you might ask yourself, how did your parents and other important caregivers, and then your powerful peers or siblings respond to your own wants as a kid, or certain kinds of wants? Maybe they were very comfortable when you wanted to, help do the dishes, but maybe they did not respond so well to your wants to be angry or big or loud or full or to make messes or to go off with your friends and be independent. How are your wants responded to? And then how have you, these are classic psychological questions, standard questions, how have you maybe to some extent internalized that way of relating to your own wants to any extent, and potentially internalized that way of relating to the wants of others? And I think when we work with others as a volunteer or in a relationship or as a friendship, we're constantly dealing with the wants of others. So being mindful of our own reactions to wanting, in a general sense, is really, really useful. And I want to offer kind of two keys about that, then open it up for discussion. I think one of the keys when working with others, and I've got 40 years of experience close to it as a couples counselor, and one of the things that you really see is a fundamental thing that happens is you got A and B. A wants something from B, and then that's where it starts. So A communicates a want to B. Often A does not communicate it very well. Maybe they use euphemisms, maybe it's not clear, maybe they disguise what they really want, maybe they communicate their want with a lot of topspin, a lot of acid, a lot of anger maybe coming at it, a lot of criticism in it. Okay, now you're B. It's like this ball has gotten hit over the court. Whoa, now what, right? And then how do you respond to it? Do you actually understand it? Do you listen for the vulnerability under the anger? Do you recognize the validity of some of the criticism maybe? Do you have a feeling that you have choice? You don't need to either just obey or go to war with them. There's a middle zone where you can make some choices about how you want to respond, right? So I think one of the keys, things that's extremely useful in relationships is to find ways to be empathic and insightful about the wants of others while reserving your own rights and while maintaining healthy boundaries and a sense of your own autonomy and equanimity as you sort out how to respond to the wants of the other person. But I'm talking here fundamentally about a receptivity, an empathy, a receptivity that maximizes the sense of the other person reasonably, that you understand what they want, you care about what they want, and you're going to deliver what they want to the maximum reasonable extent possible. And then related to that, the second thing, besides a sense of the value of really understanding other people, is that last thing I said, which is I have found one of the keys to a long marriage and friendships is to deliver the goods. Often we balk, we go, ugh, when people want something from us. But maybe if we could just slow down our immediate reaction and defensiveness and rebelliousness, that domination of perceived coming at us, we could slow it down and ask ourselves, okay, what's the maximum reasonable response I can make here to this person's wants? And I'm just going to do it for their sake and for my sake in terms of enlightened self-interest. And, to use a kind of phrase, feed the hungry bee. None of that means placating other people. None of that means reinforcing their problematic wants. An important detail is when we do feed the hungry bee, we want to encourage the hungry bee to gradually internalize the supplies that we're offering them so they become more filled up over time and less, in a word, needy in terms of how they're coming to us. I mean, there's certainly a place for that. But I think very often in our relationships, to finish, we could be better at discerning and caring about the deeper wants of others around us, especially people who've been structurally mistreated in our society. And I think a lot of us, me included, could be better at doing things that we can do. Not giving away all our money, not waiving our own rights, but doing what we can to respond to the wants of others. And one of the reasons for that over time is that as we do that, besides helping us feel good and supporting a sense of agency inside us over time, it puts us on the moral high ground so that after some hours and days and months have passed, we're in a much stronger position to say, look, really, I've understood basically what you've wanted. I've been delivering it, not perfectly, I'm sure, but I've been sincerely trying and have really changed and delivered. And by the way, I have a little list myself. Can we talk about it now? And then you're in a much stronger basis to be able to do that. Okay, I'll pause here. And we have about, we already rolled. So I definitely need to end by 4, so that's okay, I hope. Yeah, we have time till then. What do you make of all this? Any comments or questions? I think we're supposed to do this through the chat. And also,
Yeah.
Amelia, you can be kind of the discussant here, as it were.
Thank you. When the last part, when you mentioned, and we can talk to them in this way, I lost a little bit of the last part that you said, and I think I would like to develop a little bit more, and perhaps if the students also, the second part, so one is, okay, deliver, be present, etc. And then how is there are two to tango, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
What happens on the other side?
Yeah, this can be a big topic, of course. And
Of course.
just briefly, I just want to make the point that what's under our control is how we act and what we say and what we think. And we can influence other people somewhat, and there's a place for that, including the clear communication and even assertion, even fiery assertion, if it's appropriate, of our own wants and needs, our own seeking of justice. There's a place for trying to influence other people, but obviously, people are going to largely do whatever they're going to do. And many people will disappoint. They're going to do what they're going to do. So I have this kind of internal saying, I call it the 80-20 rule. Put 20% of our attention, roughly, on influencing others, and put the other 80% on cleaning up our own side of the street, being the best possible friend, spouse, supervisor, employee, ally, tutor that we can be over here unilaterally. I call that unilateral virtue. And that's good for all kinds of reasons, including because when we act in that way, which breaks deadlocks, it breaks us out of situations where, well, I'll change if you change. I'll change if you change. Oh, no, you first, right? Deadlock. And I've seen that a lot in my office with couples of different kinds. It breaks us out of that deadlock to focus on unilateral virtue and living by our own code unilaterally, no matter what they do, which does not include being pushed around by other people or muzzling ourselves, just staying in bounds, as we respond to these things. Then one of the benefits, definitely, so this goes to your question, Amelia, is that after we've responded to them, just first, that tends to reduce their upset with us so that they're less hijacked by their amygdala and so forth, and they're more able to hear what we have to say, often, not perfectly. Some people, I'm going to use a technical term in psychology, some people are just assholes. They're just going to do it. They're sociopathic, they're narcissistic, they're malevolent, they don't care, they're entitled, they're just going to do it. But often when we are reasonable and responsive to the wants of other people, it starts to develop goodwill from them. And they don't just think that this is licensed to exploit us further. And if that's the case, then we're in a stronger position to say to them, okay, by the way, there's something I'd like from you. In whatever way we say it. There are many ways to say it. I think nonviolent communication is a nice structure if people don't know it. Essentially, it boils down to when X happens, I feel Y because I need Z. And then the natural follow-on sometimes is, so from now on, I request this. So when you raise your voice to me, I feel both scared and angry because I have a need to feel safe, like all of us do. And I need to feel that I'm not going to be attacked, and I need to feel respected, like all of us do. So from now on, what I request is that you don't yell at me, and that if you are angry with me, you talk about it in a way that takes responsibility for your own experience and doesn't blame me for it, for example. So it's a classic form. And it's used in tough negotiating situations, really, really tough, Middle East, Northern Ireland, gangs. It's a good structure, basically. If all goes well, we can vary the structure, but if it gets weird, that structure is very helpful. And requests that are effective are focused on the future and zero in and are well operationalized. They're kind of specific. So we know if they meet our request, and they will know if they meet our request, and we will know that they know that what we're really asking for here. And behind it is certainly, even though it's a request, because rarely can we actually make a demand on people. Occasionally we can, but it's pretty rare in adulthood, adult-adult relationships. We are reserving our rights. Our eyes are wide open. We are prepared to, I'm asking you to stop interrupting me. I don't do that. Okay, great. So it won't be a problem then, will it? You know, I am asking you to pay back the money I lent you by the end of this month. Will you do it? Will you make an agreement with me about that? Or in a home situation, I am asking you to treat your agreements with me, your mate, raising a family together, as seriously as you regard your agreements with your coworkers at the office or in the factory. Will you do that? You know? So it's basically requests, and then you see what they do, and then internally you think, okay, you know, I'm reserving my rights as to what I'll do if you don't meet this request.
Mm-hmm. Great. I mean, it applies to so many situations, and I'm sure there are questions. Please feel free to put the questions in the chat, and we'll continue that.
Yeah.
I like very much your presentation because in our course, we have these practices of meditation on the one hand and the volunteering, which is another way of tapping into our inner resources and into situations that sometimes they are ambiguous or, you know, they require paying attention and being able to respond in the moment. And so you are kind of combining a lot of this. And now I see something else in the chat. Responding to another's needs can sometimes feel like capitulation and make us reluctant to deliver the goods.
Totally true. And that relates to what I said early on and quickly, that wanting is situated. It's situated in social structures. And if you have an A and a B, in which the A, let's say, is a kind of person who is advantaged in a particular society or history or in a situation, then that person's wants tend to have more of a dominating force, understandably. And it can definitely feel like capitulation, being bossed around, you know, succumbing, being exploited, including in potentially very abusive ways, if we acquiesce to or, you know, fulfill the demand that's come at us, even if it comes at us in the form of a polite request. But, you know, there's a steel fist inside that oh so soft and velvety glove, right? Absolutely. So it gets very interesting here. And then sometimes what happens is that if we have a history of being, I'll kind of put it, in effect, one down, factually, understandably, structurally, in many situations, then later in life, sometimes we're not actually one down. But it feels that way. And then how do we grapple with that, right? So I think it's helpful to be very mindful of these aspects, including what gets transferred in from our history, and also very aware of the social situatedness, like the differential of power, sometimes economically, classically, in a family environment, particularly historically, certainly, you know, men had more money and women were financially dependent while raising children, and that gave the person who had the money and could easily walk away, didn't have that kind of sort of bonding, let's say, as the mother would have with the child, particularly while the kids are very young. That gave that person a lot of power. So understandably, paying attention to these dynamics, I think, is super important, and not covering them over in any way, shape, or form. So what can we do? I think what we can do is, like I said, be mindful of our own transference from childhood, to use the psychotherapeutic term, psychoanalytic term, our patterns that we bring in that are not actually true today, when that's the case. Second, we can be aware of the social context, and then we can do what we possibly can to level the playing field. We can remind ourselves that we actually don't have to knuckle under to that other person. We don't have to capitulate. It's a request, and we have the right to say no. And here's where shoring up the internal resource of autonomy and the felt sense of healthy entitlement is really, really important. to repeatedly internalize this, the counter conditioning. Let's say, if we've been conditioned to feel like we're one down, and to act like we're one down, to push against that and deeply and repeatedly internalize the feeling of, I'm an autonomous being. I see what I see. I value what I value. I want what I want, and I plan what I plan. If only inside the privacy of the inner temple, in the privacy of one's own being, but to claim for yourself that kind of agency there, and then to claim it with others who are allies. Kind of a step-by-step process here. And then eventually to claim it with the other person. Even if it's a person you love, or even if it's a person that you're in an ongoing relationship with, your boss, your coworker, your neighbor, somebody down the street, to claim it with them, and to basically, whatever they might think you're one down. That's their movie. They're trying to write you into their movie, and you speak the familiar lines and walk the familiar, paces. But no, I don't buy your movie. I'm not in your movie. My movie is, you're asking for this, and I have the right to say no. And frankly, I'm starting with no, because I don't want to do that. And I definitely don't want to do that, given that you, A, B, and C. I'd be a lot more open to doing this X that you want if you would do A, B, and C. What do you think? And then we're in a negotiation. And so much of adult relationship is about negotiating wants. The only question is, can we do it explicitly and skillfully, right? Okay. When we operate in this way, then what we come up with doesn't feel like a capitulation, because we've really stressed and repeatedly internalized. And this is so important for people who've been socialized into feeling one down, right? And been put one down, to look for where they do have autonomy and can build up a sense of independence and agency. Even if it's not safe to really do battle and publicly and with the forces, maybe you're outgunned, you're outnumbered. The man has the keys and the money and the guns. Boom. But at least inside your own mind and with your allies, as much as you can really deepen that sense of autonomy and independence. I found that super important. And then when it goes well, this is also really important. When it goes well, let it sink in. Often we're afraid of feeling, I'm going to use a cliche, feeling our own power, because when we felt our power as a kid or previously, bad things happened, or we saw people, who felt their power being punished, maybe horribly, or attacked in different ways. So it's very important that when we're engaging this process of kind of expanding the range of experiences and situations in which we retain an inner freedom, when we do that, it's really important to let it feel, when we succeed at it, and it disconfirms our old beliefs, and we start pushing back the bars of our invisible cage, it's really important to internalize that it went well, that you succeeded at it. Yeah. I want to keep going, but is that okay, Michelle, for now?
Yeah, that was good. I was kind of afraid to write that, but it was what I felt emotionally when, give them what they want to the maximum extent you can. It's
yeah.
But am I just going to be stepped on,
Exactly. And definitely, I think it's okay to do that, have that giving be conditional, in a sense. Mm-hmm. Basically, that I'm going to do it for a while, but if you keep mistreating me, I'm going to stop doing it, And I think also it's helpful to just have a recognition of certain kinds of, I'll call it giving broadly, that are not contingent, they're not conditioned. They're, in other words, you're just resting in your own good-heartedness, mm-hmm. irrespective of them. Mm-hmm. Right? You're resting in your own integrity. You're rested in your own equanimity in your core, even if they're agitated. So that's a good way to relate to this as well. It's not that we're capitulating. It's that we're honoring what we really value and how we want to be, and we're dwelling there. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, super, Lloyd. And then, like you said there, Amelia, getting to Milt's here. All right, great. So you draw a parallel, Lloyd says, you draw a parallel that I find very interesting. The approaches we use with managing ourselves, like think of a time when you showed some moxie, are also often usable interpersonally. For example, when we're trying to help someone else do it. That's exactly right. That's really, really true. And, one of the, for me, blessings in understanding other people better is that it helps us understand ourselves better too. And we kind of learn, when we try to help ourselves, nudge ourselves in let's say a better direction, we can be aware of the resistance inside us, or we can be aware of what needs to also be present for that nudging to be successful, like a quality of seeing the good in ourselves, even as we nudge ourselves to be more skillful next time. And then we realize, oh, that's what I need. Maybe they need that too, if I'm going to be skillful in working with them. That's great. Okay, so the Buddha. Well, I'm not going to say a lot about the Buddha. It's really interesting. So I'll just say this, implicit in so much of the Buddha's life and his teaching, there's a very strong emphasis that that we are the point of origin in many ways for the life that we have, while also recognizing that we're situated, that we're affected by many, many powerful forces of different kinds. So there certainly is both this very interesting, and this could get philosophical, and I'll probably stay away from that, but this combination of these kind of like two truths, which one is that each wave in the ocean, each person, each blade of grass is individual. And certainly human waves make choices of various kinds all day long. And each wave is responsible for the choices it makes. And each wave inherits the results of the choices it makes, on the one hand. And that's also a way of understanding the other waves that we sleep with and work with and break bread with and disagree with and go to war with. They too are inheriting the results of many choices they've made, while being influenced, much as we are influenced, by all kinds of other waves. So that's one truth. The other truth, and it's a deep truth, is that all our waves are water, right? That we're just one ocean, and in which everything is occurring interdependently and dynamically, so that fundamentally nothing has absolute self-occurring existence on its own. Everything is intertwining and contingent. And boundaries are soft, if not arbitrary. So those are two truths, right? And they're both true. And living in the midst of both those truths, in the trenches of everyday life, in our volunteering, in our personal relationships, our home life, our work life, our political life, living in those two truths to me is kind of the heart of wisdom. And both of them really foreground the importance of heart, recognizing that we're responsible and for our lives, and that really takes us to heart, having good heart for ourselves and having courage, strong heart. Also recognizing our intertwiningness, as you are, so am I, as I am, so are you, also takes us to heart and compassion and kindness and justice for other people. So I like that. I like those two truths.
It's 4 o'clock. We still have two questions, but I mean, is it at all possible to take maybe one more?
I'll just say very briefly to Millie, we are volunteering with people from different cultures. Any thoughts about how to learn about their wants? So I lived for a year twice in European countries, Finland and Germany. I've not spent a lot of time in kind of non-Western cultures, although I've spent some time there. And I obviously am a, white man, middle class, professional, hetero, cisgender guy. So I'm limited. What I've kind of learned a lot is to be educated by people when you can. I've done a fair amount of attempts related to racial justice and understanding other people and how they've been structurally mistreated for so long. Looking to other sources like Caste, the book Caste, for example, and other things. Also, I find respectful listening and not trying to pretend that I'm not who I am with my own background and not being ashamed of it. It is there. It is what it is. It's pretty conspicuous. While also looking inside and taking refuge in one's own sincerity. Is there, and that's really useful, even whatever they think, sincerely, do you want to understand what they want? Particularly once you get past maybe your immediate first reaction or shock or defensiveness or I don't get it or whatever that might be, when you kind of find your footing, hopefully within a few hours, if not a few minutes or a few breaths, you find your footing. What's your sincerity, your authenticity? Do you sincerely want to understand, including you want to understand what happened there and why what you said had such impact on them? And you want to understand sincerely if there was some asshole-ish motivation inside you. Was there some kind of meanness or racism inside you? Or were you just clueless? But you want to really understand, right? There's a sincerity about that. Or to try to find out about a person's background or culture, or why they feel the way they feel. You can take refuge and know that you're sincere. And I think that's a very good thing. I try to myself keep in mind that the accusations coming at me sometimes, even if I think they're unjust, and they make me feel a little uncomfortable. The discomfort I feel is a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of what others have had to suffer. Try to keep that in mind too. And then take refuge in our own sincerity to understand and do better next time. I find that's really, really helpful. And people can feel that. And to just rest in a kind of, like I can feel it from you, Millie, just your vibe, just I've seen you during this time. I don't know you, I haven't heard a word you've said, but I just feel you have good intentions, to recognize the good intentions in other people. Yeah, maybe there's other stuff popping around from time to time, but they're basically good heart, to see that in them. People can feel that when we see that in them. Yeah. And then maybe just the last thing, actually, no, I see the rest, I see Sharad's comment there, and I don't see it as a question. So, but yeah, I gotcha. Okay.
Thank you so much.
I've taken enough of your time, right? Many thanks.
You have been so generous, like always. Thank you for coming and for all this that you have shared with us.
Yeah, my 2 cents, see what you think. And, whatever's helpful, I just find again and again, let it land. It's sort of like, what dwells within us? Or to say the same thing, the other side of that coin, where do we dwell? Where does our attention dwell? Where does our mood dwell? Where do our intentions dwell? What intentions, what moods, what perspectives dwell within us? And over time, through cultivation, deliberate cultivation, using positive neuroplasticity, through deliberate cultivation, increasingly that which is beautiful and wholesome and wise dwells within us. And we increasingly dwell within what is beautiful and wholesome and wise for the sake of others, not just for ourselves.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Be fruitful and multiply. Take good care. Many thanks. Thank you, Amelia.
Bye-bye.
You're awesome. Thank you, Professor. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Rick.
Bye.
Bye.